Welcome to Chapter 18. This is mini lecture 2. Now we're going to pick off where we left off with talking about production practice comparisons and what the difference is really when you're comparing organic agriculture into conventional agriculture. So this is just a quick synopsis of what we see from an agriculture standpoint. So organic agriculture, again, no synthetic fertilizers. There's fewer inputs, so we're not having to throw on a spray, herbicide, pesticide. Very, very diverse rotation. So they're going to rotate crops more so than we would in conventional agriculture. A lot of different ways to do weed control. There's more labor, though, less labor in conventional agriculture. And then yields can be lower, but yields can be higher in conventional. And sometimes that will switch depending on the year. All right, so organic production practices. So when we look at production practices or management practices, ecology plays a big role and stewardship plays a big role in it as well. So it can place greater demands on that producer's management system's skills and time. So if we're looking at, let's say, weed control, if I know that I'm not going to be able to use herbicides, how do I make sure that I have correct weed control? Very different. There's a couple different ways to do it. Those different ways might cost a little bit more, but they are approved through the USDA. So we'll talk a little bit about those as well. Pesticides. How do I keep pests out of there? Are there organic pesticides? Yes, there are. So you have to really look at the management time and the skills that we have that producer has on demand so that they can utilize it and still be an organic grower. All right, so yields and profit. I have a very dear friend. She's my best friend from high school. She is a buyer. She's a grain buyer from Indiana. She sells and buys for Cargill, and she loves talking this with me, yields and profit, because so much so now in 2018 we are seeing very competitive yields with organic versus GMO type seed. So huge misperception in organic agriculture that less production is less productive than conventional, but that is not the case. And I'm here to tell you, we've had many friendly arguments over the phone about this because so many people that grow agriculture do it so well that they are able to grow the same amount of bushels per acre that we conventional farmers do as well. So that's incredible. I mean, that's a scientist. That's an art of how to do that. So pretty neat. Forages like alfalfa and different small grains have really similar yields to conventional, in some cases better. If you're looking at field crop plants, soybeans, those will vary depending on the management and the environment, whether that environment like rain, any type of Mother Nature, like hailstorms, anything like that will obviously impact it as well. But the pre-organic premiums can then compensate for the lower yields, okay? So even if it's a lower yield, I'm going to be able to sell organic and I'm going to be able to sell my corn twice as much as the conventional grower would be. So it's kind of a picking and choosing and kind of a lifestyle choice of what you would like to do. All right, so weed control. These are fun to talk about because we get to play with fire. So this is the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges in my eyes. It would be the biggest challenge of growing organically because you have different ways to do it, but you have to kind of try them out to see what would best fit your management style. So we have cultural weed control, mechanical, and then use of weed-free seed and hay. So we'll talk about. All right, so cultural weed control, you can use rotation. We do that in conventional settings as well, but not as much. So this is very diverse. That will then include those perennial types of crops. You can use cover crops, which is also a conventional way of management. And then you can also delay planting so that you can take care of all of the weeds before they become a problem, before you plant that crop. All right, so this is delayed soybean planting and the effects on lamb quarters and pig weeds, which are very, very intense weeds, and they are not fun to deal with. So percent of control on the left, and the bottom is how we're utilizing or how we're trying to get rid of them. So purple there, we're looking at mid-May, and the orange we're looking at June. So you can see the variation in June when we're delaying it. It's going to always beat that mid-May, but if you look at the rotary hoe and cultivation in both of those weeds, it's very similar. So that's an example of control, or excuse me, delayed planting actually beating these other management type systems in weed control. All right, mechanical weed control. This is not as favorable when you're looking at weather and soil conditions, because it can delay a lot of the management things that we have to get done. So tillage is one, and this is also something that's not fun for people that want to grow using no-till management type systems. But you can no-till, you can primary till it, you can cultivate it, or use flame weeding, which was one of my favorites. Primary and secondary tillage, they have the greatest effect on weed populations, but they cost a little bit more money. You have to invest in a moldboard plow, a chisel plow, a disc plow, and then have to invest in a field cultivator and a harrow that we've talked about in chapter 15 or 16, the tillage chapter. All right, so this is a graph that'll show you the secondary tillage techniques, including stale and false seed beds. So you can see stale and false there, different ways of how to till that up. All right, cultivation tillage. We're gonna do this after the plant's harvest, or excuse me, after the crop is planted, and I'll show you a picture of it in just a second. So when we're broadcasting cultivation, we have to look at the pre or post emergence and how it's going to be most effective under hot and dry conditions. The inter-row cultivation is really important as well, because we have to look at the secondary tillage versus how it's going to be able to really have good weed control between the rows. All right, so this is that, this is a flex tine weeder, so it's going to weed out in between the rows of that plant that crop that has been planted. All right, flame weeding, my favorite way in organic agriculture to get rid of weeds, because you get to play with fire, but you have to use propane burners and you have to do it correct. So this isn't only an alternative when the soil is wet, because if it's not wet, it could catch the plant that you're growing on fire, and that wouldn't be good. So when ideal conditions to that flame when the crop is bigger than the weed. So it's going to be easier to get the fire, the burner, closer to the weed and not necessarily to the plant. And that's what that looks like. So you can see on the back there the flames going into burning those weeds.